It is finally time for Lukewarm Vampire Autumn, and I could not be more excited. This title is courtesy of my best friend, who she and I call the summer Hot Ghoul Summer, which obviously a play on Hot Girl Summer, but she and I both play a lot of horror games during the summer. I also read a lot of horror in the summer, so for us it's kind of a horror-y time of year, and then it just slides right into fall, which is also a great time for horror, especially in October. So she jokingly referred to this as Lukewarm Vampire Autumn when I started telling her my plans, because I had so many vampire things I wanted to work in, and it all kind of started for me in August, when I decided that I wanted Dracula to be my big read of October. If there's a weird pause there, I apologize. I forgot to pick up the book. Anyway, I decided I wanted Dracula to be my big read of October, my Halloween book. And from there, I kind of realized I had a bunch of other vampire books on my shelves. I've got A Dowry of Blood, Empire of the Vampire, Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, The Vampire Lestat, Woman Eating, Bless Your Heart, Club Dead, which is the next one on the Sookie Stackhouse series. So I just have like a ton of vampire books on my shelf that I want to read, but I want to start with Dracula for this season because my friend also just read this and she really wanted to talk about it. I say just read this, I think it was several months ago, if not like late last year, and she found it like really weird and really interesting, and she's been wanting to talk about it. So it's time for me to finally read it, and I just thought it would be so fun to do a vampire theme for October. And we're going to be starting with Dracula. We're going to kick things off here. I also have an audiobook version of this that I'm planning to listen to, so I want to do like a hybrid read, because I have an audiobook that's a full cast that stars Tim Curry and Alan Cumming and a bunch of other people whose names I can't think of off the top of my head. But it sounds like it's just going to be like a fantastic audiobook, and I'm really excited to give it a try. And I think it's going to be a really fun way to read Dracula. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've been looking forward to that since like August. I think that was when I made that decision. And I'm so happy that October is finally here and we can finally move forward with Lukewarm Vampire Autumn. On top of Dracula, I don't know what other books I want to read yet. I'm kind of waiting to see what I'm in the mood for. I have a couple in mind that I'd like to get to, but I don't want to say what they are until I've actually like picked up whatever I'm going to read next. Just because I have a tendency to go, I'm going to read X, Y, and Z, and then I read A, B, and C instead. So I'm going to kind of wait and see what I'm in the mood for once I get through Dracula, but I am so in the mood for Dracula. I'm so excited for this. And then I also have a vampire knitting project I really want to start. This is literally just called Vampire, and it's a shawl. I'll try to remember to put a picture in here. One of the pictures off Ravelry, but it's a shawl by a designer whose designs I just think are fabulous. I haven't actually knit any of her designs yet, but I have read through the patterns. They're very well written, and I'm really excited to make this one because it looks like kind of a bat wing shape, and it looks like it's pretty simple. It's just like bits of garter and stockinette with some short rows. I've done all of those things, so I feel very comfortable going into it. I think it's going to be pretty easy, and it's a DK weight yarn, so let me grab the yarn and show it to you, because I found, I think, a really good red for this. So this is the yarn that I have ordered. I bought it from Woolen Vine. I have shown off some Woolen Vine yarn in a previous vlog, but this is like a really nice, let's see if I can get the light to not completely cause problems in the background here, but it's this really nice kind of warm rust red, which I really like. I think that this could look also really good in like a kind of a wine red, but I just really enjoyed how like rich this color was. It's got like a touch of orange in it as well and a little bit of brown. So I just think it's going to be beautiful. I think it's going to be a shawl that I will find very wearable, that I'll wear a lot. So yeah, I'm very excited about this. This is all super soft yarn. It's a superwash merino cashmere and nylon blend, so that explains why it's so soft. But yeah, I got a hold of this, got 3 skeins of this for this shawl, and I'm just so excited. We have so many vampire things to do, vampire themed things to do, that's what I'm trying to say. And yeah, it's gonna be a fun month. I think it's gonna be great. Figured I'd take a quick minute to update because I am about halfway through Dracula. I'm just shy of the halfway point, I think. I'm on chapter 10 of 26. And I think page count wise, I'm like nearing the halfway point. But this is not at all what I expected it to be. I think then, like, knowing what we know about Dracula, that he is a vampire, it feels like going in, some of the horror should be dulled in a way, because you know that he's a vampire and that, like, twist isn't really a twist for us. Culturally, Dracula is this very significant icon, There's so many different adaptations and like different media that incorporate Dracula. So that twist is not really a twist. But the horror I found is not dulled at all. I think partially because there's a lot of elements of this that just haven't continued on with like the figure himself. There's a lot of pieces of the story that are just not present in other adaptations or other versions of Dracula. And this was the thing I was talking about with my friend. She's already read it, and this was something that she had noted too, is that like there's a lot of elements of his powers, a lot of the things that he does that just haven't necessarily carried over into the kind of cultural consciousness around this character. So there's a lot of moments where he does things that are like very frightening or very startling that are really creepy. And there's also this like kind of element where I think the horror of the book, knowing what we know about Dracula, isn't really about the vampire himself, but about like the power that he has over other people. I think there's kind of a lot going on with that, but in particular the first few chapters, which are from Harker's perspective, we're getting his like travel journal. That first few chapters is really like domestic horror feeling, because it's about a man who is like trapped in this home and he can't escape, and he's like watching somebody else plot his murder, and there's nothing he can do about it. He's completely under Dracula's power, and he's just kind of trapped. So you have this kind of domestic horror thing. You also get some like trapped at sea kind of horror. There's some, I think, interesting moments as well. Once we get kind of out of the initial section of Harker's perspective, you get some perspectives from Mina and Lucy. And so we see this thing happening with the two of them, where like you have for Mina the horror of like not knowing where her fiance is or what's happening with him, and kind of waiting for word from him and having no idea, like, is he alive? Is he dead? What's happening? Why isn't he coming home from work, from this like trip that he went on for work? And then for Lucy, you have this like complete loss of bodily autonomy, where she is just like seemingly controlled anytime she's sleeping by some force other than herself. And it's just like there's all these other different like little versions of horror that crop up that are all in some way tied to Dracula himself. But it's, I think, an interesting like use of dramatic irony now, which it wouldn't have been at the time, but like now reading it as a modern reader, you know Dracula's a vampire, but there's all this dramatic irony of characters not knowing what's going on. Harker is like walking into danger, and you know that he's going into danger. You know that he's going to be trapped in the vampire's castle pretty much from the first few pages. You kind of have the sense of like people are telling him don't go, and he has no idea what he's in for. He doesn't know what's about to happen, but you kind of have a sense because Dracula. And then, like, similarly, there's, like, various signs and symptoms that start to crop up in some of Mina and Lucy's writings that you're like, vampire. But they have no idea what a vampire is. They've never encountered one. So there's just things happening, and they're, like, finding all these ways to kind of explain away the things that they think are happening or they think that they're seeing. And it's just really interesting and really creepy, actually. I think that the horror in here is just as frightening as it might have been if I didn't know that Dracula was a vampire. There's just like a really creepy undertone to everything that's happening. I'm really enjoying it. It's a really interesting story. There is also a couple of moments, there are a couple of moments that I think are kind of funny, because you get these like weird juxtapositions of things. You have the kind of tension of the opening section with Harker, and then like the next bit we jump into, we get this bit from Lucy where she's like, so anyway, I've got 3 boyfriends and I wish I could marry all of them. And it's really funny because it's like, that's not what you're anticipating leaping from whatever's happening to Harker to this moment with Lucy where she's like talking about 3 different men proposing to her. And she makes some comment about like, you know, it's so sad that she can't marry all of them because she feels bad making the 2 that she didn't want to marry sad. So like, there's these interesting moments of juxtaposition that I think heighten the horror, and you really get to know these characters in a way, and I'm like really enjoying them. I really like Harker, and I really like Mina, and Lucy is sweet and just does not deserve what's happening to her, and you just have this like interesting set of characters, and I feel like it does a really good job of establishing their personalities. They're all very distinct. Also, I'm listening to an audiobook. That's how I've been reading this, and I would highly, highly recommend it. I think it's the Audible original audiobook, but it's a full cast audiobook with Alan Cumming as Dr. Seward, and Tim Curry as Van Helsing, And then Harker is Simon Vance, who has also done a lot of audiobooks. I think that's his main profession, audiobook narrator. I know I've listened to at least one other audiobook he's done, but he's fantastic as Harker. And basically all of the voices are really, really good. But yeah, there's a lot of sections that I'm in right now that Dr. Seward is in, so I'm getting a lot of, like, Alan Cumming at the moment. But, like, all of the performances are incredible. The woman who plays Mina, fantastic. Susan Dwerdon, I think is her name. Just the whole audiobook is wonderful. And I'm typically quite picky about audiobooks, so I'm glad that I'm really enjoying this one, and I'm finding it, like, very engaging, very easy to kind of follow along and understand what's happening, despite it being a classic and having some, like, language that is unfamiliar to me. So yeah, I'm having a great time with this. I'm really excited to finish it. So I finished Dracula today, and I had a great time with this. This is a wonderful spooky season read, and I would highly recommend the audiobook that I listened to. I'm not normally an audiobook person, but this one really kept my attention. But I loved this. I'm going to give 4.5 stars just because the ending is really abrupt. This book spends a lot of time building tension and building dread and leading up to this kind of battle with Dracula. And then the ending just kind of happens. The book just kind of stops all of a sudden, and it's like, and anyway, it's 7 years later. And I felt like that didn't quite work given how much build-up the story has. So that's the one thing that didn't really work for me. But I really enjoyed this. It's a really interesting blend of these really horrific moments. There's a lot of horror in it, and it's not the kind of horror I was expecting. We kind of have a whole range of different kinds of horror, and there's just lots of stuff going on here. There were moments that, like, had my jaw genuinely dropping open because really horrific things were happening, and I was so shocked. There were moments where I was, like, cringing away from my desk because of something creepy happening, and I just, like, was so surprised at how horrifying this book was, and it just wasn't, like, scary in the way that I was expecting it to be scary, because Dracula is such a pop culture figure at this point that, like, you think you know the story of Dracula, but it's actually really, really creepy in a way I wasn't expecting, because the horror isn't entirely just around, like, the vampire thing. There's all of these other kinds of horror that are mixed into the story. So I really enjoyed that. And the other thing that was really unexpected for me is that there's a lot of focus on relationships in here. The core of the story is really this group of people who all are, like, kind of distantly connected in various ways, coming together, really meeting each other and forming relationships and friendships with each other as a result of Dracula's influence in their lives. Dracula has done these things that have impacted them, and they're kind of coming together to try and solve the problem, figure out what to do about the vampire situation, and they just form some really sweet friendships. You have, like, Van Helsing sweeping through England adopting people. He's just like, and now you're my child, and now you're my child. And he's just, like, this kindly old man who's taking people in and trying desperately to help these young people deal with a horrific situation. And you have all of these other characters who are these young people kind of coming together in a moment of crisis and just constantly pledging friendship to each other and trying their best to help each other, really leaning on each other's strengths, and it's just really sweet, actually, in a way that I wasn't expecting at all. I also really like that, I can't remember if I said this in an earlier update, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, I genuinely can't remember at this point, and I'm not going to go look at the footage to find out, but Lucy Westenra, who is a kind of central character in the first half of the book, she is, at the start of the book, talking about how she has these 3 suitors, these 3 different men who are in love with her. The 3 men are friends with each other. They're all in love with her. 3 of them propose to her. She rejects 2 of them and accepts a proposal from one of them. And what I really love about this is that the men that she rejects immediately are like, that's totally okay. That's your call to make. We're so happy for you that you found love. And as much as it hurts us to know that we're not the people that you love, we're going to do our best to be good friends to you. Like, you will always have our support. And I just thought that was really sweet. And then on top of that, it doesn't impact their relationships with each other. Like, of the 3 men, one of them gets engaged to Lucy, and the other 2 don't, like, have envy about that. They continue to be very close friends with him, and they really, like, support each other throughout the story. And I just really enjoyed that friendship dynamic. I also really love Jonathan and Mina, the Harkers. I think that they're both really interesting characters, both very competent in different ways, and I really enjoyed how much page time Mina got, because she is actually really important. I really liked that Mina is a central character in the vampire hunting situation, the vampire hunting quest. She's really important to their efforts, and ultimately they're not able to progress without her. I just really appreciated how much that she is respected and loved within this friend group, and they don't like belittle her or treat her as if she's fragile or anything, because I was kind of expecting that to be what happened, and they didn't at all. They all like really appreciate her input and respect her, and there are moments where they're trying to like protect her from things, and those moments generally go wrong. So they see like that's gone wrong, and they're like, okay, well, clearly we need to include Mina because Mina is good at this. Mina is clever and really good at putting together the pieces, the puzzle pieces, in a way that we aren't. And I just really appreciated how much Mina got to be a central character, and she wasn't just like sidelined as the only woman in the group. I just love Mina a lot. She's really cool. I love her relationship with Jonathan, and they're really cute together. There are some genuinely heart-wrenching moments in the latter part of the book that have to do with Mina and Jonathan, and it's so good. The relationships are really interesting. The horror is really interesting. This wasn't at all what I was expecting, and I just had an absolutely great time reading it. So now I finally read Dracula. My friend and I can talk about it, and I'm definitely going to be coming back to this at some point in future and reading it physically, just because as much as I love the audiobook, I know that I missed details because I tend to like zone out a little bit when I'm listening to audiobooks. So I'm definitely going to be coming back and rereading this in future. I just had such a good time with this, and I could see this becoming like a spooky season favorite for me. Anyway, I was thinking about what book I wanted to read next, because obviously it's Lukewarm Vampire Autumn. We gotta come up with another vampire book. And I was originally planning to read either Woman Eating or the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. My computer has gone off and it has my notes on it, so let me just get that to come back up. Anyway, I was thinking about reading either of those, but I think I'm actually going to read Dreadful Company by Vivian Shaw, which is the second book in a series that I really like. This is following Dr. Greta Helsing, who is a doctor for monsters and the undead in London, and this book sees Greta traveling to Paris for a conference, but Paris is infested with evil vampires, and she has to like go into the catacombs to deal with this situation. And also she has a vampire love interest and a vampire best friend who are going to be helping her with the situation, I'm sure. So there's going to be a lot of vampires. So she's not directly a vampire, but there are lots of vampires involved. And I just love the first book in this series. It's such an interesting blend of horror and comedy that really, really works for me. I find that I really like that combination. And the first book in the series sees her hunting a serial killer because he's injured somebody, and that person like becomes one of her patients, and she's like, well, I have to stop the serial killer, obviously. And I just really enjoyed it. It was so good. Very excited to see what kind of adventure Greta is going to have in this book, and how her friends are going to help her, because that's another big element of this. Like Dracula, this has a lot of kind of found family elements, these different people coming together and combining their different strengths to reach their goals. I just really enjoy that element of it, and I'm really looking forward to diving back into this world. Okay, so I'm not very far into Dreadful Company, but I felt like I needed to update real quick just for two quick reasons. One, I think I can give you a better description of the book now, and two, I'm having a great time, and I'm just delighted to be back in this world with these characters. So, more complete description of the book is that Greta has a colleague who calls her and is like, hey, I'm supposed to be at this conference presenting, but I'm having emergency surgery, so can you go in my stead? And she's like, sure. And so she and her friend Lord Edmund Ruthven, who is a vampire, they go to Paris, and then Ruthven has to unexpectedly leave to deal with some home ownership issues. There's some sort of like dispute over a title or something, and he runs off to deal with that. So she is alone in Paris and gets caught up in the crosshairs of a revenge plot that's not directed at her, but at Ruthven, and she's having to deal with the situation alone. At the same time, we're getting introduced to some new characters that I'm really liking so far. There's like an unofficial guardian of the city who is a werewolf and is also like a blacksmith and a historian, and he seems very cool, very like nerdy in a fun way. And then there's also a couple of professional psychopomps. They are people who usher souls of the dead to the afterlife, but their names are Crepusculus and Brightside, which I just find very charming and silly, and I'm enjoying being in this world again. The first book in this series is a like murder mystery where there's like a serial killer terrorizing London, and Greta gets caught up in that situation because one of her friends is like, hey, there's a very injured man on my doorstep, will you come deal with this situation? And that kind of like kicks everything off. This one seems like it's going to be a very different structure, so I have no idea what to expect, but these characters are just so lovable. They're all so kind of quirky and interesting. They have very like vibrant personalities, and I just really enjoy all of them. There's a really cute found family there too, with Greta and her friend Ruthven, and Ruthven's friend Cranswell? I think it's Cranswell. Like, is it Cranswell or Cransdell? I think it's Cranswell. There's also Frances Varney, who is another vampire and is kind of a love interest kind of figure for Greta, and also a very close friend of hers. And then her kind of uncle, or pseudo-uncle, Festida. And it's just such a good cast of characters. There's some new people we're meeting and learning about, and I'm just having a great time because it's just such a fun mix of horror and whimsy, and it just totally works for me, and I'm just delighted to be back in this world. So I'm about 60 pages in. That's kind of, things are being laid out. This is where the plot is starting to kick off. And I'm so excited to find out more about what's happening, and I'm probably going to spend the rest of my evening reading this, so I feel like that's going to be a really fun evening, but I'm going to go do that. I just had to check in because I needed to gush about how much I love these characters. I think it's been a few days since I updated, but I am just shy of the halfway point in Dreadful Company. I'm still having a great time, and I'm really liking the way that the story is shifting. I think I said in the previous clip that this is a revenge plot, that Greta gets caught up in this revenge plot by a vampire against her vampire friend Ruthven, and that's true, but as I'm kind of nearing this halfway point, some new pieces are emerging. We're learning a little bit more about the world and about some of the magic elements of the world, some of how it works, and some of the bureaucracy even around those elements of the world. So there's now this other thing that's emerging that may or may not actually be related to what's happening to Greta, to this revenge plot piece, but it seems to be related to someone who is, like, attached to that revenge plot. So yeah, there's just like this bigger thing that's starting to emerge, so it's not just the revenge, and I'm really enjoying the way that those things are starting to kind of twine together, and I'm super excited to see how this is going to play out. We have a lot of my favorite characters recurring in here. I'm loving the new characters. We've met another new one who is a little demon who likes to bake. I love him immensely. There's just all these really great characters, and it's just a fun time. These books are just a fun time, and that's what I love about them. So yeah, I'm about halfway. I'm going to try and read as much as I can tonight. My goal is to read this, if I can finish it in like the next day or so. I am going to be at my partner's apartment over the weekend, so I don't know how much reading I'll actually get done then, but I'd love to be able to finish this in the next day or so. Like, if I can read a good chunk of it today and then maybe finish it tomorrow during lunch, that would be ideal, because I want to fit at least one more vampire book into the month, and it's actually currently the 24th, so I don't have a ton of time left to read vampire books, but I want to get at least one more in. I haven't quite decided which one it's going to be, but I know I want to read at least one more vampire book. However, I am also doing another hobby thing because I also started my vampire shawl. I wanted to make sure I was doing also some of my vampire themed activities. Haven't got a lot of video game time, or at least not like solo video game time. I've been playing Silent Hill 2 with my friends. We just started it last weekend and had a great time. Played for like 8 hours. Not everybody was able to join for the whole time, but people were kind of popping in and out. It was a really fun time, and I'm glad that I got that time with my friends. So I haven't had a ton of solo video game time, so I haven't actually started. I think it was Romance Sylvania and Vampire the Masquerade Swansong were the two I was going to start. Maybe I'll get to those this month, maybe I won't. But I did want to get to the shawl because this yarn has been sitting next to my desk for like a week now, and I've just been like eyeing it and going, oh, that looks so soft, I really want to work with it. So I'm kind of going back and forth between this shawl and a sweater that I'm currently working on, but I did just start this one today, and I think I might take both with me over the weekend, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just take this one. But I wound up some yarn right after work today, and yeah, just decided to go ahead and cast on. I did have to restart once because I counted wrong, and that was a problem. But it's fine. We moved past it. We've conquered the counting issue, and I have just this like beautiful, it's kind of a rusty brown red with a little bit of orange in it. I just love this color. I like how rich it is, and then that's what that's looking like. You can tell like on this side, alright, see if the camera will pick it up. It's a mix of garter and stockinette, and you can start to see the shape of the shawl come together because there's these points that are emerging along the side, and with some aggressive blocking, those will get pointier. They will become like little points, and it'll be more like batwing-like, which you can see kind of where that's emerging a little bit. But on this side, you have some garter sections, and some stockinette sections. The garter sections have increases in them, the stockinette sections have short rows, and that's what like makes the shape. So I'm loving it. On this side, it looks a lot less defined because there's sections like this bit here is a stockinette section, and it looks remarkably like a garter section on the back. They're very similar, the main difference being like in a stockinette section, this is all purl ridges, and then on a garter section you have garter ridges, which have a little more space between them. I don't know how obvious that's going to be. You can kind of see it there. So anyway, I love how this is turning out. I've kind of gotten back into the flow of short rows. It's been a while since I've done a lot of short rows, so I had to look up a tutorial to remind myself like how do wrap and turns work. But now I'm getting back into it. I'm getting the flow figured out again, and I'm just having a great time. This is way easier than I thought it was going to be, and it's really just like 2-row repeats. Garter sections are a 2-row repeat. Stockinette sections are a 2-row repeat, essentially. And yeah, it's very much like TV knitting, and I wasn't expecting it to be, so I'm having a great time. This is just really enjoyable to work on, and I'm gonna keep working on it. So yeah, that's all my vampire-y updates at the moment, and I'm hopeful that we'll get to read at least one more vampire book. I'm not sure which one. I'm currently kind of debating between Bless Your Heart and the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I think one of those is going to be the vibe for the end of the month, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'll figure it out later. But for now, I'm gonna go probably fix my dress. I have a bit of that's not the right word. I have an alteration I need to do on the dress I'm wearing to a wedding on Saturday, because it has like cuffed sleeves, but my wrists and hands are fairly small in comparison with the size of clothing I typically wear, and so the cuffs want to come up to like the middle part of my hand. So I need to go move some buttons on the cuffs over so that they actually sit where they're supposed to, like at my wrist. So I need to do that this evening, but other than that, it's just going to be reading and knitting time, which is going to be lovely, I think. So I'm going to go do those things, and I will catch y'all later when I have either finished Dreadful Company or started the next thing. Well, you'll find out. You'll find out in a second. I don't even know what I'm doing. We'll all figure it out together. I just finally finished Dreadful Company, and it's a good thing too, because the cats are getting rather impatient about getting their dinner. Let's see if we can show you. There is the Elwood. We have a pumpkin over this way. I don't even know if I'm showing you the cat. It's hard to aim this at this angle. But there you go. They're getting rather anxious that I feed them, so I need to get up and do that. But I've just finished this, and I loved it. I'm giving it 5 stars for sure. I have to. I just had too much fun with this one. This is just such a charming book. There are really high stakes in this. The things that happen in this series matter, but also it is ultimately like a warm, cozy, charming story about these people coming together and helping each other grapple with the dark parts of the world. And I think this one deals a lot with specifically like good people becoming complacent and then the harms of that, the ways that evil creeps in when good people who with the best of intentions become complacent and don't remain vigilant. We have some characters who are, you know, they're in charge specifically of like looking over Paris and looking out for Paris, and they don't do that. They have other things going on, and they just don't really do their jobs in that way, and bad things happen as a result. And I think that's a really interesting conversation, and I liked the way that this had a lot of like good characters who aren't necessarily perfect. I like the ways that this series deals with that. Like, you don't have to be perfect to be good, and that good people can fail and good people can screw up, and what sets them apart is their willingness to right their wrongs. I really enjoyed this. I think it's a really interesting story. I love the returning characters. There's also some new characters that I love, and it's just overall a really fun time. Just really engaging and charming, and it's got kind of a quirky writing style that really works for me. It's an interesting mix of horror and fantasy and humor that just completely works for me. It's completely my taste in this kind of a book. I love the mix of really horrifying horror with high stakes and lots of humor and silliness and quirkiness, and it's just a good time. So yeah, that is another vampire book down. Oh, I should clarify. we have vampires on both sides because Greta has two friends, Ruthven and Varney, who are both vampires and are helping her try to rectify this situation in Paris. And then there's also a coven of vampires who are, I don't know if you could say they're evil exactly. You have a bunch of vampires who are doing questionable things. They're killing people for sure, but they're led by someone who is himself particularly awful. He's driven by hate and revenge, and he's also like obsessed with aesthetics and like looking like a vampire, and so that kind of drives a lot of his actions throughout the story. And there's kind of a question throughout of like, you know, what might have happened if these people had not been led by this particular person, and whether they can come back from that and learn a different way to live. So I just really enjoyed it. We have lots of vampires, and I just had a great time. So yeah, that's the vampire aspect. And now it is currently the 29th. It's the evening. I don't actually know what time it is because my watch died. But it's, you know, probably like 6:30 if I had to take a guess. My battery's flashing, so I gotta talk fast. I think I can fit one more book in if it's short, and I think what I'm gonna try and do is read A Dowry of Blood. This was not the one I was planning to read next, but given that I don't have a lot of time left in the month, I want to go with something short. And I know this one is a epistolary novel, so this is a series of letters and kind of journal entry type things from the main character Constanta, who is one of Dracula's wives, and it's kind of a retelling of Dracula from her perspective. I guess not a retelling necessarily, but it's about her relationship with Dracula and with the other. Apparently I didn't talk quite fast enough because the battery died on me. So we got a fresh battery in. But I think I was saying this is about Constanta's relationship with Dracula. And I think more specifically from what I recall from reading like the first couple of pages, we know at the very start that she, and potentially along with the other wives, has murdered Dracula and is writing all of this down as a history that explains how they've gotten to this point. And I've heard incredible things about the writing and about the story, so I am very excited to read this, and I feel like it is appropriate to cap off my Lukewarm Vampire Autumn with a retelling of Dracula, or a book inspired by Dracula, given that that is where I started. So, gonna dive into this one, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's gonna be great, but first I need to go feed these cats because they are getting quite upset with me. Also, can I find out what time it is? It's 6:30. I was like spot on. It's 6:31. So success. I'm gonna feed the boys, I'm gonna feed me. I'm gonna read some of this. I did actually read a couple of pages of this earlier, so I am already diving into the story, and yeah, we're gonna cap off this Lukewarm Vampire Autumn with one more vampire book. And I also have made some progress on my shawl. Let's see if I can figure out a spot to put this so I can show you the shawl progress, because it's right here. Yeah, so I don't think I'm gonna finish this by Halloween, but I'm almost a third of the way through the pattern. I'm on I'm on section 9 of 33, so section 11 would be actually 1/3, but I'm really happy with it. I'm really liking it. It's hard to see in this lighting, but it's really just a texture shawl, so like a little bit of stockinette here. This part is garter stitch, so that's pretty much it, and I'm really enjoying working on this. It's been a really great project. It's really easy. It's just enough interest to keep me engaged while I'm knitting, but also easy enough that I can kind of work on it while I'm watching do other things or working on other things, and it's been like a perfect pattern for right now. Happy Halloween. I've got my Halloween shirt on, and I am also officially finished A Dowry of Blood. I forgot I took the dust jacket off of it. Hang on, let me get that. I finished it, and yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars. I think the last half is a lot stronger for me than the first half. I really like all of the characters, but we don't really get much of the cast until the latter half of the book. And in the first half, I feel like the jump between the person that we are told Constanta was before becoming a vampire, because we don't really actually see her ever before she's a vampire, the person we're told that she was beforehand, and the jump from that to the person that we see her as in her early days of her relationship with the unnamed character who is Dracula. It's just really abrupt feeling, and I felt like I was being kind of held at a distance from the characters in a way that made it really difficult to like care about any of what was happening, which feels like an awful thing to say about a book that is about this particular topic. I think I just, for the first half, I really wanted to know more about Constanta, and I think that it would have been more impactful if I had had a greater sense of what was lost for her in that shift from human to vampire, because she also loses things through another means. There's like a war going on that is the event that sets up her meeting with Dracula, and I just felt like for the first half I felt so removed from the characters, and it felt a little bit cold and clinical because the whole thing is told from Constanta as she's like many years later, by which I mean centuries later, retelling the story of how she met Dracula and the events that lead up to the inciting opening event of the book, which is that she has murdered him. And we're getting this like whole history of their lives together as a way of her explaining how it came to this, how the events unfurled in such a way that it led to him dying at her hands. And I really enjoyed a lot of this, but I just feel like that opening would have been stronger and more impactful for me as a reader if I had known more about Constanta, had more of a sense of who she was and how she was changed by her relationship with Dracula. That said, I did really like the second half when we get more cast in the book and there's kind of more going on, and the ways that those new personalities in the group change the dynamic, and the ways that their lives change as a result of that, and the ways that they're all individually impacted by Dracula's cruelty. Yeah, I really did enjoy the last part of this, and I really liked the ending. It did make me tear up a little bit. I think the ending is my favorite part. I think it's really well done, and I think that the conversations this raises about like the reasons that Constanta got into the relationship and the reasons that she stayed, and the things that eventually led her to be so determined to get out that she murdered Dracula. I think that the conversations it's raising and the way it's dealing with them are really well done, and I think this is just a really interesting book and a really interesting exploration of its topic. It is obviously very dark and very difficult to read in a lot of moments because you know that these horrible things are happening to all of the characters, and it's all again being told from Constanta many years later, who was talking about like the ways that she adjusted to living with Dracula and all of her kind of tactics at surviving life with him, and the ways that she slowly came to realize his cruelty. I think that part is really well done, and I also like the writing in general is incredible. Like the actual sentence level craft is fantastic, and I think this is a really enjoyable reading experience at that level. And so it's an interesting mix with its very dark topic and it's just really lush, lovely writing. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience. I'm glad I've read it. I think I'm gonna give it 4 stars. I can't remember if I've said that already, and I'm glad that I picked it up. But that is my last vampire book for October, because obviously it is Halloween and it's 8:50 at night, so I don't think I'm gonna read another one this month, but I'm pretty happy that I managed to read 3. So little summary: I read Dracula, gave it 5 stars. I read Dreadful Company and gave it 5 stars, I think, 4.5 or 5 stars. And then now I've read A Diary of Blood and I'm giving it 4 stars. And I've had just a great time. It's been a really fun month. I really enjoyed doing this kind of themed reading. And I did read some other things kind of interspersed, which I think helped me not get bored with just reading the same thing. I might have been able to read more vampire books if I hadn't done that, but I also think it's possible I might have read less if I had just read only vampire books. So throughout the month I've been reading kind of other things interspersed between the vampire books, and honestly it was a really great reading month for me as a result. So I'm really glad that things have gone the way that they have, and I'm really glad that I've gotten some of my vampire books off of my TBR and onto my red shelf. So yeah, good time overall. I'm not finished with the shawl. I am still working on it. I made it to section 10, I think, so I'm about at the 1/3 mark. I've got to do a few more rows for section 10. Actually, no, I think I've just started section 10. So I've got a little ways to go on that. It's one of the short row sections. So the rows go very quickly because you're only doing like part of a row for most of that section. So it'll go quickly, and I'm just really enjoying the process of knitting it. But unfortunately I didn't finish it. I also didn't get to play any vampire themed video games, but it's fine. I was playing Silent Hill all month instead, so you know, it was a good trade-off there. So anyway, that's all I have for today. Let me know in the comments below what you read for spooky season. I would love to know what everyone else was reading, and I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.